Hi, everybody. This is Majken from Global Goals World Cup, and this is Marisa, pointing the other way. Marisa, today that we will be talking about why building a Global Goals World Cup, a new World Cup for the world, and some of the surrounding things that we're building around the World Cup, organizing an online clubhouse, doing a coaching program. So Global Goals World Cup, the idea, why? I think that there was room in the world for creating a new World Cup. It's not that we don't like the World Cups of the World Cup of the world, but it also felt like that we've done World Cups the same way for quite a long time. So the idea of saying, when UN asked all of us to say that that it is these 17 goals that we kind of all have to try to implement in our countries for the next 15 years. When they did it in 2015, we were kind of like, okay, what does it leave us as sports organizations, right? In all of this. So it's the idea of creating a World Cup where we had to put focus on the global goals. And the first one for us was obvious because we make football. So, talking to UN about putting the icons on the balls and use that as a communication tool. So whenever you have a football out in the club and everyone playing with it and you see the icons, it becomes a new memory or a new story for them. But then also, what was the next activity, next level we could take it? And that's why the idea of the Global Goals World Cup came up. When it's like, okay, let's make a World Cup where we really have to have the goals at the forefront. So that means putting them into the rule set of our tournament, and teams having to qualify by taking action for one of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it was very much in us trying to engage in the UN conversation or the global conversation of let's all find ways where we can implement and work for the global goals for us to be able to reach them. And I think, Marisa, I'm gonna let you jump in for a second, but just for everyone to understand. So when you play in our tournament, and we give 4 points after each game. So that means that you get 1 point for creative style. And that is not just because it's playful to dress up, but it's also because it is important for us to talk about upcycle and recycle in the world. But the process and the time that a team spent together in creating these outfits is also valuable time in creating friendships and bonds. And when we create friendships, we grow a sense of trust amongst each other. And when we have that trust, we feel stronger when it comes to speaking up, which is the second point that we get is for engaging the crowd. Dare to talk to people, dare to get people involved in whatever goal that you're playing for. And then the actual football, that of course for us, team sport is key, and I think it is fundamental, more important than how it's played out today as growing communities and teams in the world. And Nietzsche also said, never trust an idea that wasn't done in movement. So I think the whole idea of us, moving and using our bodies. And then point for taking action, what are some of the ideas that we come up with for one of the goals that we're playing for? So these 4 points is the fundamental basis of our World Cup in the ones that we're playing around the world. Now.
You got the pointing right that time. And I would also like to add, so first, thank you. I mean, we are just so excited to have been asked to come on and to speak about the global goals and how we see gender, sport, and development through the global goals and the different programs. As Majken mentioned, also which I'm going to talk a lot about is the Global Goals EU Coach Ambassador Project, which we launched last year. And so just to speak about that. But I think what is important is also to mention my first kind of interaction with the Global Goals World Cup. And Majken, it was actually in 2016 at the Women Deliver. And I think the main point, obviously, Majken just mentioned the 4 points of the Global Goals World Cup. But another thing is it's for women, and it's by and designed by women. And you really saw that, of course, in 2016, right, Majken? It was launched as part of the Women Deliver conference. It was a huge conference. All these women from all over the world were there. Of course, sport was on the agenda, But there was a lot of other topics. There were some intersections as well. But it was amazing to see a lot of the people also from the conference and take part in kind of, I believe, the launching of the Global Goals World Cup. And it took place in Denmark. And again, what I'm going to be speaking about a little bit, not at this moment yet, but the coach program, which then took again place in Denmark. And so it was a really kind of beautiful thing to be a participant at the first 2016 amongst many women from all over the world, and to see the teams and to see kind of everything Majken's mentioning, the actions around it, but then also there's a lot of local partners involved, the outfits, the excitement around, goals scored and supporting other teams. So there was already a lot of that in 2016, and it's just grown from there. Majken, would you also want to comment on that? Just like the first in 2016, kind of the launch in Copenhagen, how special that was for you guys to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, it was amazing, because it was the first time to work closely together with Katja Iversen from the CEO of Women Deliver and her conference, because I mean, she's based in New York and it's been around in the world, and then suddenly she was bringing the conference to Denmark. And that we were involved on a very, in a sense, a governmental level of saying, we were some of the people that was asked to make sure that the conference was not just a conference that was in the closed environment, in a sense, but bring it out to the Danes and the people. So that whole thing about creating the Global Goals World Cup, and we had a huge survey done with the Danish FA and the University of Copenhagen of figuring out the status of youth girls football in Denmark as well, and getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of girls from around the country involved in trying to make a recommendation of changes that needs to be made for women's football in Denmark. So in that sense, we had lots of involvement, and the challenge that we heard at the time, where people were really starting to speak about partnerships, and they said unusual partnerships, and you go like, what does that really mean, right? Unusual partnerships. And we was like, okay, so we make a plan, and we say every time we make a tournament, we need to have government, we need to have city at some level, we need to have private sector, we need to have NGOs, and we need to have just amazing women, so the whole thing about saying, let's try to get everyone involved. And over time, it becomes easier, right? But when you don't know the language of all government institutions, you kind of just like, I have no idea what they're talking about, when they say, whatever they're saying. But we definitely, still have that challenge. We still see that, and now it's more like a playful way of making sure that everybody gets in there, and people know that we say it when we come out to a country. It's like, yeah, but we need everyone. So find a way to make sure that we get everyone when we do.
Yeah, and I think from seeing that, I also saw, for example, like you said, the partnerships could also be integrated really into the tournament. So you had different kind of public officials who were refereeing. You had, you tried to get local groups who also were able to offer something on the side. So, also have for the spectators, something additional to the football and the football matches. And so there was already a lot of that I saw in 2016. And then I guess from my own experience, then, recently in May in Copenhagen, when we had the Global Goals Europe edition, you saw a lot of that as well. But we've been, you were able to expand on just in that 4 years as well.
I think
I think I'm still okay.
Better, right?
Yeah, but there was also one other thing I would say is I have actually video footage from the 2016 and Shabnam. So she was a player in 2016, and then she was a coach, and in the recent Europe program or Europe edition. So that was also kind of really interesting to see that it's not just people take part and then they stop, but they continue, or they find other ways to be involved in the Global Goals World Cup. And I also was kind of wanting to ask you, over the years, so since 2016 till today, when you think about like how teams form. So I would just I think it'd be interesting for people to know. So how do people decide what goals to act on, or kind of what some of the actions actually look like towards the goals, and what are kind of different actions that you can comment on that have been inspirational to you, as well as kind of what you've learned from it. So really the global goals, the action points.
Yeah, for sure. It's just let everyone know that I can see questions are popping in, and when we're finished talking, we will answer some of the questions here. We really appreciate that you are engaging and listening in. And I'll also say for after these conversations, if you want to engage or talk, and just reach out, it'll be easy to find. But the actions. That has also really been an interesting journey, because in the beginning, I think it was what does it really mean to take an action for a goal? If you I pick one, but then how do I figure out what I want to do for that goal, and how does it qualify? But now, where we have had more than 550 teams playing in the tournament, and we try to make stories about the teams and document some of them, and then that gives others a chance to see, okay, this is what they are doing. And so I was talking to a Jordanian team the other day, and then they have gone out to supermarkets in Amman and made that so when you put in your water bottles and return that, instead of getting money back from it, then you get seeds. And the whole idea of trying to grow trees in Jordan, there's only 1% of the land that is covered by trees in Jordan, and they have a great possibility of really growing that. So all these kind of ideas inspire other teams to say, okay, if that's where they're going, the idea of planting, okay, let's all think about planting. And then suddenly somebody says, that there's this type of tree that you can plant that really works well if you have a coastline, because it can live both on land and in the ocean. And okay, somebody goes like, so these are really the trees that we should try to plant. So it has this complete triple effect on each other. So our job, really, in the sense of saying that we really, really want to grow a World Cup that is where all women in the world feel that they can have access to the tournament. So that means that we really have to grow to many more countries, so the women can have access to the tournament in their country or in the neighbor country. So we don't overdo and travel. What was my point? I lost my point. But so all of them feel that connect us all in all of the actions that we can take, and meet and talk, and share the activation ideas that we are doing. And that was my point. Our job is to make sure that we actually promote all our teams as these superstar role sports models, because that's what they really are. I mean, they come out, some of them really learn how to play football from the beginning, some of them, but all of them come in with the strongest passion of meeting up for the World Cup, really prepared in what they look like, what they're going to say, and the actions that have been taken.
Mm-hmm. And a large part of that then is the ability of the World Cup, the Global Goals World Cup, to have a media presence and a following, and to create really good content, and to share the content on the media, the different social media platforms, and the connections with the different media partners, so that it's not just that these actions, of course, it's amazing what they're done at the local level, but really trying to make it more visible, at a regional level and then at an international level. So that, it can be shared with other people as inspirational, but then also for the women themselves to see their, the effects that their actions can have at the next levels up. So that's really an amazing kind of what Global Goals is also able to do, is to really share the actions with a wider audience. And I think a lot of people appreciate that. I was also thinking, How did you, so if we started to talk about the importance of female coaches, and if we looked at the EU project, the coach ambassador, what kind of drove, or what was a decision, or why did you think to, the importance of working with female coaches? Because generally it's been the captain or the team leader, but it hasn't really been working with coaches up until, I think, until 2018. Yeah.
I think I'm a B-level coach in the UEFA system, and I appreciate that I am that, just for me to understand the system. And I've been coaching for many years, but I also very much felt that women in the coaching system were isolated, because I was 1 out of 24 men, and that is just so normal in the story of women taking their coach educations. And then the realization of saying that, but we could think about different ways of doing coaching programs. We could definitely think about different ways it should be in the coaching programs, but also how we connect people. So we built networks. So I think that was the challenge that we took on, also you and I together, in the whole sense of building the coaching program for last year, was, could we find a way where we could connect the women, so we could kind of blow away that whole sense of women feeling isolated in the coaching world. Because you do, as an individual person, you are so easy, not so easy, but you are definitely easier to worn out. You get tired of endless stories about you not getting promoted at the level, not having the chance to coach the team that you want to coach. So it's not just 100% connected to the Global Goals World Cup, but let's use the Global Goals World Cup to also start this conversation and try to see if we could battle that, and then battle the whole thing about creating teams, or creating coaches that were strong enough to go out and make teams from women that did not come from the sporting community, could have been challenged in a million different ways, and then bring them to play in a Global Goals World Cup.
Yeah, so this, as Majken just mentioned, so the project really had different goals, but two of the main ones, the principal ones, was to really work with female coaches across Europe, and to test out the model, essentially, so that, of course, if it worked well, then it could be perhaps part of it implemented in other regions. And then the second was really to try to find women who had fewer, for different reasons, different barriers, who had fewer opportunities in sport, and to really try to find these women and try to identify them, and have the coaches form teams with these different types of women coming from all different types of barriers. We didn't say what type of barrier. The real challenge was that the women, haven't had as many opportunities. And so we're going to play a video, actually, to kind of introduce everyone, and if you haven't heard about it, into the Global Goals EU Coach Ambassador Project.
So the big hypothesis, if you can say so, of the Global Goals World Cup is that by adding a purpose to the activities of playing sport and of playing football, more women will allow themselves to actually go to the pitch. And that's what we wanted to test in this project. Populations in general are being less and less active. And especially women are not sport active, and it's something that is very difficult to change. What we see is that many female coaches find that they're pretty alone, and we wanted to find out what happens when you bring them together and create a strong sense of togetherness between them. So last year we gathered 12 women coaches from all around Europe. How could we make something that we're so proud of that we want to yell it out to the whole world? And we gave them the challenge to each go home to their local areas and set a team of women who had never played football before, and try to teach them about both, of course, playing football, but also about the global goals, and then come back to meet with us in May to play in a big tournament. They are not only connected by being attracted to football and to sport, they are also connected by having a bigger purpose. So by all of them working locally with one of the global goals, they also became an activist network.
We are the first refugee migrant football team in Greece, and we are playing for the SDG 16, peace, justice and strong institutions.
Some of the teams chose to act for a goal that was very close to them. And the other way was to choose a goal that was very far from why they gathered. So for instance, we had a team of women who had all formerly been violated in their relationships. But instead of choosing something related to that as global goal number 5, gender equality, they chose to work with life on land because it somehow seemed to be able to separate why they were socially vulnerable from the actions that they wanted to take. But in both cases, choosing a global goal and working for a bigger purpose allowed these women to have something to fight for and something to go on the pitch for. So it somehow gave them a reason to play football, which was bigger than the act of playing football in itself.
No, I was just smiling during that because there were so many moments. I mean, it really is a great video because it captured kind of, you know, we called it a 2-tiered project. So we worked really strong, you know, we worked closely alongside the coaches. And so that was kind of one tier of the project. And then of course we were all at the same time, like parallel to that, we were planning planning and getting everything ready for the Global Goals World Cup to take place. So just that video, there were so many moments that, you know, I think for a lot of people that were part of it, it just makes them smile. And I also would say that, of course, there were just some examples. So you saw some examples from Spain, from Natalia's team, and you saw some examples from Greece, from Hestia FC. And those were beautiful examples, and there are a lot of other ones. So I would just, you know, encourage, if you are interested, to kind of see, you know, there's definitely the website that's still up, and we have a lot of great documentation and images from that project. So no, that's all I want. I was smiling, and it's amazing that, you know, it was a year-long project. And also what we wanted to comment on is that a lot of the teams are still continuing. I mean, obviously we're in some weird times now with COVID-19, but teams are still continuing, coaches are still being part of the Global Goals World Cup community. And so that's just also been very inspirational, I think, for us, you know, and more on the organizing team to see that and to see the commitment. Were you also, what were your...
It was super exciting.
What were your reactions?
To see, I mean, just for everyone also to see in the film that you see the team from Spain. So Let Us Be was their name, and they came from women in an organization that works with women that has been in violent situations. And as it says, instead of focusing on that, they focused on biodiversity in Madrid and looking at ways of making sure that there was created enough plants around for bees to have the best possibilities of surviving. So they would go, and they've been to so many schools now, these women. They go out to schools, they talk about plants, and in that whole thing about creating your own little plant, they also talk about the respect for each other. So they get that conversation in there by planting, and then they talk about the actually math of the whole thing of having enough distance, or having the distance between the plants so the bees can, whatever time a bee takes to travel from one place to another. And I think that it's such a beautiful activation. And I was talking to them recently because they are still, I mean, now they are on break, but they have been practicing and playing together now a few times a week. And they were, when I was talking to them just before the corona, it was they were just going on their first football camp weekend together as well, right? So they have suddenly now created this football community with these women, and are inviting now other partners in Madrid to join in, so they can offer the trainings to more women. So it's amazing. And talking to Natalia, she was, you know, she's one of the, you know, best. She's such a player of futsal, and have organized the first futsal FA in Madrid. And when we met her, right, she was tired it's a hard word, but she was really, because the fighting has been been also
She was
really
frustrated.
yeah. And then going through this whole process, she suddenly is like, I feel the purpose of life again. Suddenly, I'm doing training with these amazing women and seeing how they grow.
Yeah. And just as an example, just so, because Majken touched on the Spanish team, but so in total we had around 80 players, female players, on 13 different teams. And the 13 different teams came from across Europe, and they were all led by a female coach. What was really interesting is that amongst the 80 players, we actually had a lot of different nationalities represented, which really showed you the diversity within the countries as well. So that was also really interesting. So it wasn't just that it was 13, different nationalities within Europe, but we had so many different nationalities represented and many people with dual nationalities. And so we really had this mix, and it kind of gave a representation of Europe in many ways, amongst the players. The players were from ages, I believe, 17 all the way to 65. Some had a lot of football experience. Some were totally new, as Majken just said. And the football experience, even though they did have a lot, they still had to face barriers to get there. So it was really, everybody had the commonality that they had faced different barriers to be active and to play sports. Other than that, there was just such a variance across a lot of different factors. And so you saw teams that formed around different types of identities. So she just gave an example in Spain, but we also had teams that were grouped, that were really close, working within an organization. And they also, to be even a female player, they had struggled with different health and addiction issues. And so they chose a goal that was really relevant to who they were. Whereas other groups, maybe they saw something in the community that they wanted to act on. And so that's how they chose their goal. So we saw, through it all, we just saw so many great findings and so many interesting stories that came out of it. And the group of 13 coaches, it was a challenge, I would say. When you look at, we collected so many interviews and quotes, and a lot of them even, we had different ways of getting feedback throughout all. And it was a challenge because it was a coach ambassador role. And a coach, obviously we all know that as a female coach, for some, they had a lot of barriers, but then the ambassador role was also a challenge. And so we were all just, from the organizational side, we were all super proud of these women, And another thing I would point out is that a lot of them mentioned that of course, they took on the role, but they really needed to form small kind of networks and local, in order for them to coach and to activate these women towards the global goals. They leaned on other stakeholders in the community. So they built this kind of, support system around their team. So it wasn't just, okay, this is our team of, 6 or 7 women, but they created a support system. And that was really kind of an effective way to keep pushing forward. Majken, did you want to add anything else there? Just about the diversity.
Super, super interesting that because we asked about something that was really complicated, right? It was complicated for, not so much for them coming together and going through a coaching program where we all had, everyone invited and together in Copenhagen, but then we challenged them to go back in their community and put a team together that wasn't already an existing team, but go out and find groups of women that could really need this type of team community that a football team can create, and learn how to have a relationship with a female coach. And so the challenge and then bring, coach them over a period of time, and bring them to Copenhagen. And for some, that are not traveling all the time in their lives, that whole thing of then being together in Copenhagen for 3 days as well, both playing and being in workshops and activating. And so, but I also have learned in working both with people, host cities around the world, when they do when we partner with somebody in another country to do the Global Goals World Cup, and now with the coaching program, is that when you ask something that is complicated and difficult, the outcome at the other end is rewarding is not the right word, but it becomes such a learning for everyone, and that you've been through that whole process, is that you really go like, we did it. It was unbelievable what we just succeeded in, pulling off, growing a Global Goals World Cup, pulling off, creating this team and getting it out to play, and then see how many of these coaches that are still really strongly connected as coaches, and the stories that I hear, that they themselves also now are growing in being more aware of their role as a female coach. When you go into a coaching position, be aware of how you negotiate and talk, and self-love, love yourself for being this, and understand that there is tons of amazing women out there. We just have to remember to connect and support each other on the coaching part of it.
Yeah, that was also another big finding. So we focused a lot throughout this project to really learn from the coaches, because they were doing something that was the first. They were taking also the global goals methodology and applying it kind of on a longer term with teams, and also within like this coaches network. So we learned immensely from them, and I still thank them to this day, for all the feedback they shared with us. Because it's not that we just want to have that on a paper, but we actually want to, the idea is also to create more, a greater coach network, and to also implement this type of a coach program in other regions. So it's been really invaluable, kind of the insights and the honesty that was shared. And also I would like to also mention that the players also gave a lot of feedback along the way. They shared with us, we did a baseline and an endline survey, and actually many of them wanted to share, that, and we found some great things about that, because it was really important for us to know how this project was working, and in different contexts in different areas of Europe. And so we found that the players, they did learn a lot about the global goals. Of course, it depended on what they already knew, but it was learning about the global goals because they were doing something about them and taking action. And I think that's something that's really important. Like, they didn't just learn and understand it on a sheet of paper, and there's all this great material about global goals, but they took action, and they learned what it was like to do something and to find out what works and what doesn't in their context. So I think that we're actually at 30, so we're past our 30 minutes. I don't know if it would be
So
time.
I want to tell everyone that, first of all, if you're curious about creating a Global Goals World Cup in your country, then and you think that you have a network that is, or a group or an organization that you think that could really throw themselves into a year-long, complicated working together with us, but building the World Cup in your country, of course, just reach out. For everyone that are here from Kenya, then we did play in Kenya in 2017, and that was amazing. Then we played in Uganda this March, and we will be coming back to East Africa next year. And I think it's Kenya, Uganda, hard to say where we're gonna end up at this point, but we're gonna be there. And we are also, Nigeria is also kind of waiting to kick off a tournament, and the same as Morocco. So that is the areas, the countries that we're working on in that region. But then, of course, also, when this whole thing happened, then we had 9 tournaments lined up to do this next year, and we, of course, postponed them. Most of them we pushed into 2021. We might try to figure out if there's a ways that we can do some of them in the fall. But and in that time, we was like, okay, what do we do then? And then so we created this online clubhouse that is a clubhouse. In a sense, you want to have a physical space. You kind of open the door, you come into a clubhouse, and what do you really want to be in there, right? I mean, now we have trainings and sessions about learning about the global goals, figuring out ways that you can do teach kids, about the goals, using sports. And so we have these different elements in there. Again, if anyone wants to join in, then you are super welcome to reach out. This idea, but what should be in the clubhouse, and how are we? So Diana from Kenya, so she's she's coaching in the clubhouse on Mondays and Thursdays and Fridays. She's on right now as we are speaking. So she's been doing her session today where she has focused on today is Global Menstrual Day. So she's focusing of the conversations and both also stigmatizations and shaming of all this, but also women in sports when having their periods. So so for everyone, just remember to celebrate and speak up about our menstrual day today. And tomorrow she is starting a session with African dance. So every Friday for the next coming weeks, it will be African dancing with Diana.
And another thing about another thing just about menstruation. I mean, think also it's the importance and the connection with sports. So in the past, I had worked with a couple organizations where without having the sanitary pads, tampons, without these types of things that you need, I mean, it can be a hindrance. It can be a barrier. We were talking about barriers to sport and participation. If you don't feel comfortable with what's happening and being able to feel safe that you're not going to bleed through your shorts, you're not going to be able to play. So also think about that and what that means, to have those types of resources to play is really an important thing. I think so. And one other thing I would also like to add is, because I've had some questions from people, and then I think we have a couple questions from the live audience, but just those, because in the past when I said that I was working with Global Goals World Cup, people said, oh, is it also for female players that maybe have some talent in football? Is it just and so people ask kind of these different, who can participate, what type of women, and so I think what was interesting about the Global Goals World Cup in Europe is that we did see our teams, there were really some women who had real football experience, and they also really, what they gained from the project was the social activism. And so they were able to gain in other areas where another person who maybe was more into social activism and already knew about the goals and hadn't had the football experience, they really took away some football skills and interest in the game. So we saw that it's not just for one type of player, of course, and not one type of team, but that it can work for everybody. And it really is, the coaches did amazing work, and they were able to identify and bring these teams together. So I think that their role was invaluable there. But I would say we could take the questions that we have. Let's see. Okay. What support do you bring to the women coach? You think South-to-South cooperation? Conference I did, Gilmartin, listen in, violence, problem, abuse to players, changes of that.
I think when the first one is what support you bring to women coaches, if it is in a sense of what is the support that we're bringing into it, I think it is creating a network of them. So when we do a coach program, so the first one we did, we had 13 coaches together, and now the next one that we're working on is a coach program in Jordan, and to build a network where the coaches are connected together, not only taking the coaching program together, but also connecting when they are in the process of putting their teams together and getting their teams to come and meet. There's a level of I maybe use the word protection that we see because we are, global goals focused. So when they put the teams together, it is with the idea that the team come together to have a purpose of something that they are doing together, beside also playing football. So there's a almost like a protection of the teams we see in some countries, that the coaches feel they're proud of what they're doing, and they know that their country has a focus of the global goals. And then they suddenly come in and say, we're going to, coach these women, and it is, bringing and creating a new community with a different focus on purpose. We see more women interested in coming out, but we also see that a country proudness or a city proudness of these teams coming together.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just would say one thing that, so it was essentially in some ways a pilot project, what we did. And we did get the feedback, because it is a challenge, and the coaches, of course, they achieved it. But Financial resources we suggested for the next time around. I mean, the coaches definitely need a stipend. They needed, especially in the beginning when they're asked to form teams and, to create, they needed more resources. If they didn't have the support of a local organization from the get-go, then that required even more resources, more time. So I think the next kind of this would definitely include some financial resources or a stipend for the coaches. So, I mean, and that's important that they also are paid for their work. So, this was a pilot project that wasn't possible when we did it, but I mean, that would be kind of a consideration, I think, for a next round of it.
I think it would also be really interesting to see if it was possible for a sponsor to sponsor a coach that you could go in and financially help. So there becomes in a sense salaries and what you're doing into the coach program. So that's an interesting question. With an increase in esports, you think that would be an area worth venturing into in the next couple of years? So I would love to know what it is completely that you're thinking about that. If it's us, or I mean, we definitely see esport for us, in my mind, there's a level of saying, could we create an online version of the Global Goals World Cup, in a sense of saying that in that sense we can reach people differently when people are not, we have the women that are playing the tournament locally, and I absolutely love that our tournament is local, but is there a chance that we can follow them? Can we follow teams online, and is there ways of we can create online point systems where fans around the world can also engage together with the teams and for the goals and stuff like that? So I do think that there's a huge level of turning our project to an e-project in the world. So absolutely, and that one, if that's what you were, if that was the question, I hope I got that one right.
This would be a good question for today.
Good question. It is a super complicated process of doing an application, but I also want to say that don't get too intimidated by it. Just make sure that you have the time to make a good application. We applied the year earlier and we didn't get the funding, and then we applied again, and we learned from the first process of writing the first application, and because the feedback that we got from that one made us aware of, what are their minds of what they also considered important within the Erasmus funding system. And I think it is complicated for small organizations like ours, because you really have to self-finance a fair amount of the budget up front and spend the money up front, and then they will come in at the end. And if everything is in order, then you get the rest of the funding back. And for some organizations that are big enough to gap that funding, it's easy. For us, it was complicated. We definitely had to go out, okay, we have to borrow some money to gap this. But at this point, I wouldn't be afraid of applying for an Erasmus Plus project again next year. We're not doing it this year, but next year could be a good one to do. I think taking you through the process is really just getting the application, and understand that you need to spend a few months on doing the application, so you don't get tired in the process and start doing something too quickly. Make sure that the partners that you want to partner with in other countries, that you really spend the time with them and talk through what would be really key to try to achieve together. So spend enough time. That would be my most, and then probably also work on it every day and have somebody who's good at writing.
The other thing was, I mean, we were able to pinpoint based on what the EU said about, you know, the gender inequalities in coaching, and also kind of they highlighted that there had been a gap in terms of the physical activity levels between men and women, you know. So we really also thought about that and kind of that knowledge and that kind of need that, or this kind of, a need that was addressed through research and through the EU, and tried to also focus on how we could tackle that, because it was already kind of the work we were doing, but how we could tackle that through this project as well, or address it. So I think just being very aware of, you know, always checking out the websites and being aware of kind of where their priorities and strategies lie, it will help you in kind of creating a successful application. But a lot of times it's really hard. I mean, it's really competitive as well, I would say. But the partnerships are key, you know, to have strong partners. That's important. I think that maybe those are last.
You want to throw any more questions at us? And if not, then just everyone, I'm hugely grateful for you all listening in. Remember to go out and play ball or whatever. Yeah, so our next step is next year we're going to get beach volley into our clubhouse work. So just whatever sport you're doing, just go and be active and have fun with it. And just thank you for being here. And Marisa, as always, great talking to you, and Amy in the back rolling this out. Thank you for Sports Legal to inviting us. And I hope that we will continue to have great conversations of building sports together, and especially for us. I mean, also focus on building women's sports.
Yeah, I would just echo that. And Kaidan and Amy, thank you so much. I mean, this is a great opportunity to lend your platform to us, the African Sports Network. And we also have a lot of documentation. We have some good resources. We're all about sharing. I mean, we spent a lot of time as a group. We were a team behind this project, and the coaches, I think, would also love to share more of their stories. So if you want to hear more about what we spoke about today, please get in contact or check out the Global Goals World Cup website. So we have a lot of, you know, also strategies and learnings that, you know, the whole idea was to share with others. So please also check that out or get in touch. And thank you.